Welcome to Even Just a Little, where we explore the beautiful gift of choice, tiny trusts toward big freedom, those moment-to-moment decisions we make that build life. Today, I am just truly grateful and honored to have with me Ian Simkins, who is the lead pastor at the Bridge in Nashville, Tennessee, and just a wise, wonderful, very compassionate human. I'm very eager to talk with him.
Oh,
And
thanks.
probably most importantly, devoted husband and papa to three little boys.
That's right.
Wow. So there's a special place in heaven, I always heard, for anybody with parents of, and I love little boys. I was a teacher. I mean, I love them. So
Mm,
but what beauty and fun you must have in your house. Welcome, Ian. Thank you
thank
for
you.
joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I like to start by diving into how you became, in your case, a pastor, a lead
Sure.
pastor. How just a little bit about your journey, and specifically because I found so interesting in reading your bio and listening to some of your podcasts, the beautiful piece your parents played in helping
Mm,
you, breadcrumbs, I believe it was described, that may have
yeah,
led you in that direction. So that might be a good place to start. Welcome.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, that's a dangerous thing to ask a preacher to share his story. How much time do you have? That's
Oh, that's
I could
that's
get out
great.
my flannel graph and try to make it an acrostic. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan, oldest of seven. And my parents started homeschooling me and the rest of my siblings. I was around 11 when they started with that, which in the dark ages of the 90s, homeschooling was much different than it is now. We were kind of
Yes.
figuring it out as we went. But yeah, my parents did a really beautiful job of letting us actually wrestle with ideas and not letting us get away with easy, simple, pat answers. They were the first, I think, to instill in us the idea of critical thinking, which, I don't think I appreciated at 11, but I can look back now and think, man, they definitely laid the foundation in some pretty remarkable ways. So grew up in a lovely home. It was chaos, there were nine of us
Oh,
trying to homeschool together, six boys and a baby girl. So it was just whatever trouble you can imagine we were getting in. But my parents became Jesus people, I think, a year before I was born. So they started attending a church, and that's kind of where I first learned about Jesus. That's where I was first invited to preach at 16, and that was an unexpected invitation, but that kind of set me on a bit of a trajectory that I was not expecting, and that's what led me to study student ministry in Chicago, which led me to my first student ministry job. And our lead pastor was removed in a pretty dramatic fashion, and that's kind of how I accidentally became lead pastor. And
wow.
kind of these I can look now over my shoulder and realize there's a lot of moments that felt accidental at the time that I can now see kind of God's kindness in sort of guiding me along the way. But I come back a lot now, especially since becoming a father, to so much of the appreciation that I don't think I had as a kid that I now have as a dad for yeah, just how my parents encouraged us to think deeply, to hold things with open hands, to be curious, to ask good questions, to see every environment as a learning environment. I remember the first time I was with my grandpa most of the day, and he was, having us, work on some things around the house. And I came back from that day, and I remember saying to my mom, "Oh man, I have a full day of school now still, don't I?" And my mom, she was like, "Did you learn something with grandpa?" I was like, "Yeah, I learned a lot of things." She's like, "Then you're done for the day. That's as much education as anything you're gonna do in a book." And I remember that being
Mm.
like so life-giving to me. I was like, "Oh, is that what learning is?" She's like, "Yeah, that's how." It doesn't just happen in this one particular place at this one particular time, and that sort of set me on a trajectory that I am really really grateful for.
Wow. Sounds like you had some very wise parents.
You sure do.
Um,
Yeah.
So they allowed learning to be vast,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful thought,
Mm-hmm.
um, but also allowed you to wrestle with a little bit of when be curious when you're
Yeah.
curious, maybe curious about what's going on in your day, but also when things are working, but maybe when things weren't working so well. It
Mm-hmm.
sounded to me like they allowed you to stay there and learn. I mean, there's critical thinking in that, but it seems like there's such a tendency to create these lives for our children sometimes that are easy or and that seems like that is such a rare and beautiful gift to give your children to let them experience difficulty and stay
Yeah,
with it.
that's right.
Can you think of anything of practical, anything, any just so that's that is really faith in action your parents were living and
Mm-hmm.
trusting.
Yep.
So, can you think of anything? Does anything specific come to mind when you?
Sure. Yeah, I would say it wasn't just curiosity around topics. It was also curiosity around people. Like they taught us really early on to not assume that we knew everything about a person based on one interaction, and I think that they regularly were modeling that for us. Through a myriad of different ways, through the people that we hosted, through the ways that we served. Like they had a really strong conviction around, especially around holidays. So there was a ministry in Detroit called Meals on Wheels that I know is global at this point. But their conviction was, hey, before we do presents or anything, we're gonna go and we're gonna serve other people, and not just serve them, but we'd often be invited into their homes and would spend time learning about their story. And I remember thinking that was different than how a lot of my friends experienced the holidays, for example, but being really grateful for the way that they didn't just encourage us to be curious, but like modeled curiosity and asked great questions of other people. And I mean, both my parents in their own right are just very, very, they're very good at seeing people in a way that I'm realizing is a pretty rare gift. Even in their generosity, we regularly had 1 to 4 additional people sleeping at our house on a couch, on a pull-up mattress, on a they just that's just the kinds of people they were. And when you're a kid, you don't realize that it's unique until you
Right.
you start to learn about other people's families. So I have regularly come back to not only the things that they like taught us to do or ways to hold the world. I think the curiosity that a lot of me and my siblings have now was way more caught than taught. I think we just watched them do
Mhm.
it, and it just led us to, I think, experience the world in a much different way.
Well, and as a parent now, you realize that's not easy to do
That's
either.
right. That's right.
Just taking care of those your little people is a big job,
Yes.
and your job, and then so wow. Well, I'd like to know them. I really would.
I hear that a lot. They're amazing. You would love them.
Oh, so well, so that's a little bit of how you became a pastor. Why do you stay with it? What is your I read also that when you were, I believe, at Poplar Creek, you fell your love for God and your God grew and
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Is does that continue to be what keeps you in such a serving um more than full-time, I mean,
Sure.
pastor, yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, there's the role of pastor is hard. I won't pretend that it's not hard. There is a heaviness, but I also feel like, man, I get a front row seat to life change and transformation in a way that, well, I just had a conversation this morning with a woman who was sharing with me some of her story. And I remember even in the middle of the coffee thinking, "Oh, this is going to be fuel in my tank for the next month." Like whenever I'm feeling, the weight of a decision that maybe I wish I would have made differently, or like very real organizational tensions or things that I'm unsure about, and then you get a front row seat to. I mean, at our local jail, we got to celebrate like 25 baptisms this morning from people that we're able to minister to through a guy that the Lord kind of brought into our path, seemingly out of the blue. Like So yeah, there is a real heaviness, and I hear other pastors talk about the weight of preaching and the weight of shepherding and caring for a staff and a church. Man, the beauty of getting to see God do a work in people's lives far outweighs the weight and the strain. And that's not to discredit it, like ministry can be really lonely sometimes.
Hmm.
I think even I meet a lot of pastors that struggle with a lot of like identity issues, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of am I stewarding, these people and these resources well? I think those are all good things to scrutinize. But man, just in the we just put 280 students on buses this morning to head to camp for the week. And I just already know there's going to be stories of life change. Student ministry was what got me into ministry in the first place. And so I'm like filled up knowing, man, there's a whole army of students and leaders that love them that are going to have a radical encounter with Jesus, some for the first time. Like that's a pretty awesome thing to say that it's a part of my job. That's a part of my nine
Yes.
to five is getting to, be a part of these conversations and these interactions. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think ministry that isn't rooted in a love for people
Hmm.
is in a dangerous place. If it's about your platform or your accolades or your reach, I think eventually that caves in on itself because your own success is just not enough to sustain anybody, I think.
Maybe
Particularly
that's
in,
not just ministry.
that's
That's
right.
any.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And it's the kind of thing that it informs my preaching. I think my writing is better, and it's more enigmatic and more representative of our church because of the time that I spent at the hospital this week or
Mhm.
walking a couple through a crisis or I think preaching that divorces itself from like the actual lived lives of the people you're trying to serve. To me, that's always a dangerous road to walk. So I always want whatever we're developing as a ministry team to reflect like the actual needs of the people that we're called to serve, and not just sort of pie in the sky, ivory tower pontificating.
It sounds very the humanity, keeping the human
That's right. That's right.
in it. So, well, my work, my art, I've done some writing, trying to put it all together,
Hmm.
and it's all motivated by wanting to share divine love through beauty,
Hmm.
through the body, through breath, through
Hmm.
being, through creativity. And I would love to dive in chatting with you about beauty because I think
Sure.
it's so much misunderstood, and even art, because my
Hmm.
intention with art is to it's just to create something beautiful.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize when I first got into it that really is, I mean, it's a way of sharing. It's the way I love.
Yeah.
So I would love your, John O'Donohue has a quote, recognize, recognize the simple majesty of ordinary.
Yeah.
I think beauty is, it's all around us. I mean, it's in the faces of your little fellas. I mean,
That's right.
it's in our conversation, if we look for it. So
Hmm.
I'd love just your thoughts and how we can implement beauty into our lives, because I think it's a missing piece for a lot of people.
I absolutely
Um,
agree.
so
Totally.
I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. There's a poet named Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and she
Mhm.
said something like, "Earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God, but only those who see take off their shoes." And I reading
Oh,
that thinking, I want to spend the rest of my life taking off the shoes, recognizing that what we would call, I started a passion project years ago called Beauty in the Common, and that was kind of our whole kind of
really?
heartbeat was helping people discover, recognize beauty in common ordinary spaces. So everything you're saying resonates with me profoundly. And
Oh,
I had first kind of someone had introduced me to the Transcendentals, and the Transcendentals are truth, goodness, and beauty. And I realized that at least in my kind of like Western ministry context, I've been taught a lot about the first two. You know, truth kind of being like the doctrine piece, the
mhm,
goodness
mhm.
being kind of like the ethics aspect. And I was like,
Yes.
man, I don't hear a lot of Western pastors or ministers talking a whole lot about beauty. It was like it was the forgotten third leg of the transcendentals. And what I discovered personally is that where truth is often trying to convince, beauty seeks to invite. And like when I made that connection, that was like a light bulb for me. I was like, man, I think I'm less interested in trying to argue people into any kind of faith or any kind of doctrinal position, and I'm way more interested. Like, man, can I just invite you to see like the goodness of God in the grand moments, but maybe even more profoundly in the mundane ones. And I think it was Madeline Langle. She said, we draw people to Christ not by telling them how right we are and how wrong they are, but by showing them a light so lovely that they want with all their hearts to know the source of it. And you know how like certain quotes feel like
Yeah,
they give
I
language to
love
how you
it.
felt, you know?
Yes.
So beauty has a way of doing that, where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we might not agree on this interpretation of Matthew 5, but can we all agree that like this sunset is amazing, and the possibility of an intelligent designer
Mm.
being behind what we both objectively recognize as just beautiful. Like, what if we just started there? What if we started with, I mean, can we just lean in on that a little further? Let's
What if
let's
we just
not.
started there and stayed there for a while?
That's what
You
I'm
know?
saying.
Yeah.
All of those things. I remember reading a brain science journal years ago, and he was taught the illustration he gave was really helpful. He said, when it comes to negative or painful things, our brains are like Velcro. And when it comes to beautiful things, our brains are like Teflon. And he was
Mm,
saying his whole kind of point was our brains naturally attach and hold on to like negativity or pain or complaining. And he goes,
mhm,
we have to actually swim upstream to actually achieve like the neurological benefits of gratitude or wonder or awe. He's like, but if we can actually choose a discipline of making space for beauty in our lives,
yes.
it actually changes our neurochemistry. Like there's a physiological shift that happens when we recognize, oh man, this is a beautiful sunset, or like in my case with my little boys, like just appreciation for what God is doing in their life and in their creativity. And I'm realizing in my own life that I think so often I'm moving far too fast and I'm far too distracted to allow myself to be captivated, because I got a schedule to keep and I got objectives to hit, and that doesn't often lead to the kinds of flourishing that I think that we were designed for. And that is, I think, in a lot of ways, the gift of children is they have a way of like drawing you
Absolutely.
out of this like accomplishment minded utilitarian at all cost efficiency is king kind of thinking to
Because they don't
just
care.
they
They
don't
don't
care.
care what you're
They couldn't
doing.
care
They do
less.
not. Yeah. They care about the important stuff.
That's exactly right.
The rock that you just stepped on.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we take, I mean, this is my passion too. So
Hmm.
practically, beauty in the common. I wasn't aware of that. I would love to
Hmm.
have known more about that before we talked. But so how did you help people to notice? Because I mean, I think it ties directly with mental health
Hmm.
crisis too. Beauty is always available. It's always
That's right.
waiting. Just so, so what are your thoughts on some tiny trusts that people
Hmm.
they could invite beauty um, into? I mean, it's there anytime. You can find it somewhere if you
That's right.
look.
That's right.
Because so, what do you think?
I think one, you have to dare to believe that that's actually true first off. Otherwise,
Oh, that's
any of
so right.
you know what
That
I
is
mean?
so
Like
right.
if we're
Because
not
it's
there, then any of the
skeptics. Yeah.
exactly any of
Yeah.
the tips or practices aren't going to matter because we're not actually convinced that there's beauty to be experienced. Like when Jesus says and I'm summarizing, but he like points to children. He says they're actually closer to the kingdom than a lot of you religious elite. Like, do we actually believe Jesus when he says that? So that's where you have to start, I think. But for me, I've realized in my life that I tend to be a bit of a romantic when it comes to these things. I want to do something grand and dramatic and seismic. And I think, at least in my life, the battle is actually far more often won in like seemingly small, insignificant choices. Like Annie Dillard said, "How we live our days is how we live our lives." Like it's maybe not a $40,000 trip to Croatia. Maybe it's like what I try to do is when I get home from work every day, I turn my phone off entirely until my boys are asleep. It's
I
not
love that.
that big of a choice. It's honestly about 90 minutes. It's not even that much time. But I found that, man, even if I have my phone on me and I like feel it vibe, I'm like taken out of the moment of beauty with my boys or with my family. So I've made these like small, like micro decisions.
Those are the
Just
tiny trusts I'm
That's
talking
it.
about. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
exactly it. Totally.
Yes.
So a lot of it, for
Yes.
me at least, circles around technology. I think technology, this is a bit of a hobby horse for me right now, but if your phone is the first thing you look at every morning and the last thing you look at every night, that is forming you in some way, shape, or form, whether you're aware of it or not. It is a formation device.
Mhm.
And I think that is a big reason that we have lost captivation and awe is because we have a dopamine machine within arm's reach at all times. So like why would I even sit on the back porch when I can watch a half hour of YouTube reels or what, you know what I mean? So you have to make some choices there.
But, and once you start doing that, once you
Yes.
start making those choices, though, you begin to realize how artificial the other is.
100%.
When you see so for people to know that there is a choice that is not only much more fun eventually
Mm,
once you break that need,
that's
but
right.
also it's so good for you. So good for you. So
But it does take it's like if you've only ever eaten fast food, boy,
exactly.
it is hard to even imagine what a five-course meal tastes like.
True.
But you have
Yes.
to believe, like part of what makes fast food so effective is it's by nature addicting. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain chemical equation that says to your brain, more of that, please. And I think our phones are the same way. I think
Yes.
entertainment can be the same way. I think even something as simple as like for a season, I would pray, Lord, like help me just to be captivated by you today. I don't know where that's going to be. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm going to pray with some level of boldness. Like, I don't want to live a distracted life. I don't want to live, there's a passage in Genesis 28 with a man named Jacob, and he has this line that has haunted me for years where he said, "Surely the Lord was in this place and I wasn't aware of it." And I do not want to live 80, 90 years on planet Earth and realize in hindsight, like, man, surely there was beauty here. Surely God was up to something, and I just was unaware of it. My buddy Hugh says that he said the work of the Christian is like archaeology. It's to unearth where God is at work in whatever environment you're in. And he's like, which I have found to be true. Like God's always, I think, wanting to show, to captivate, to draw wonder and awe out of us. But if we're going a million miles a minute, 24/7, it's very likely we're going to miss it, and that's a very real struggle for me. This is not an area of strength, to be honest. I have to regularly like try to swim upstream to say, okay, when was the last time I went for a walk and breathed real air, or read poetry just for the sake of poetry, or I'll make excuses for not going to see live music because, well, the tickets are a little expensive. Like I can talk myself out of all of it. And I think that's part of what like slowly beats some of that wonder and awe out of us. And I
Mhm.
think in some ways you almost have to get ruthless to say, no, I'm going to make space for this, even though there may not be like a practical ROI at the end of it?
Well, and that for me, because I tend to be a kind of a busy bee also,
Yeah.
um, it, exhaustion. I'm too
Yeah.
tired. So
Yeah.
it's hard. It's easier to just turn on the TV or,
That's
you
right.
know, so, so, um, well, this has been fascinating to chat with you. I knew it would be. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Well, I mean, I'd love it if you have time to dive in a little bit. Speaking of the busyness and the busy minds,
Sure.
um, of the contemplative practices, because
Hmm.
I read that and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the beauty. It's almost because you have to slow down
Yeah.
for
Right.
that. So I
Right.
would love your thoughts. I mean, one of my, of course, as art, I love to use art as a means of drawing closer to God and sharing
Hmm.
that. But I just love your thoughts on how that might be an option. Beauty, looking at life through the lens of a child, which means slowing down,
Hmm.
and then maybe these contemplative practices. What your thoughts on how we can implement any contemplative practices you think would be readily accessible for people to
Yeah.
utilize?
Totally. Yeah. Man, that's a great question. There are a few things that come to mind for me.
Okay.
One of them that I had to kind of face was, I would say I would use the word expectancy. I just wasn't I had in all of my education and experience, I had sort of become like I don't know, an obnoxious cynic. Like I just didn't expect good
Mhm.
things for a season. And my
Yeah.
buddy, oh, he had this definition of cynicism that was so good. He said cynicism is self-fulfilling scarcity. And I was like, that's how I've been living. I've been like, I've already tried
Can
it,
you
or I've
say that
already.
again? That is so
He
good.
said cynicism is self-fulfilling scarcity. Like beginning every day, not expecting to see or experience or be moved by anything is like, in a lot of ways, just became self-fulfilling for me. And I was
Yeah.
almost self-righteous about it, like I've already tried that, or we already read that, or we already gave that a shot and it didn't work then and it won't work now. I had become so justified in my assuming negative outcomes, and not like I'm not saying be like a naive pie in the sky. Like you have to be planted in reality to some degree. I totally understand that, but like for me, much of the spiritual practices that I learned about felt so out of reach because I didn't feel holy enough for them. Two,
Mhm.
I didn't feel mature enough for them. I'm like, well, I'm not a monk. Like I still live in an actual neighborhood with real people. So like I became really interested to see if other ways that we can sort of like distill some of these down to really tangible, practical, like breadcrumbs. So like for us at our church, one of the things that I talk about a lot is scripture before screens. That's it. I don't tell them how long or like should you burn incense while you do it? Do you have to face a certain
But
direction?
that's a tiny trust. I
It's
mean,
a
that's a
tiny
tiny
trust.
trust. It
And I
is. Yeah.
and I'm not even saying like what version to any of that, but like, man, what if we just all made a commitment to to actually soak in this instead of the algorithms every morning? And it's that idea of incremental gains. It's like, okay, you might not see an impact day two, but I guarantee you, if you commit to that over the course of a year,
Hmm.
something in your soul begins to shift. Like that I'm the recipient of it. It's the same with lifting. If we go and lift weights one day, we're not going to be ripped and toned the next day, but you do that every day over the course of a year or 2 years or 5 years. So for me, it's become a whole lot more about some of those like micro habits, and I
Tell us those micro habits, Ian.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, so I mentioned the powering my phone off when I get home every day until my boys are asleep.
Hmm.
Every morning, scripture before screens. There's a book called The Common Rule by Justin Earley, and I've borrowed a number of his practices where he talks about one meal with friends. I just think there's something like so ontologically true of all of us that we are disarmed around the table, like we see people for who they actually are. He would suggest, and I found this to be really helpful, fasting from something once a week. That doesn't have to necessarily be food, but like choosing to intentionally like remove something from my rhythm, just to kind of be, I think anything that has addictive qualities should be fasted from regularly, whether that's
So what if what if we fasted from hurry or
Totally.
worry or
Absolutely.
yeah, so things that are uh
Absolutely.
feeding our hurting places.
That's right. That's right. And most of the other things I don't think would be, they're not mind blowing, but like, for a brief window, I had a radio show in Chicago, and it was a 5 day a week show. And part of the insatiable rhythm of having to have an opinion about everything that was happening in the media every day
Oh,
was starting to wear on me. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
now stuff happens, even if it's in the Christian universe. I'm like, sometimes the world needs my ears more than my words. I don't have to have an opinion about everything the moment that it happens. And like, that's to the hurry thing. There's this, oh man, I can't remember the author. He's a Japanese theologian. He wrote a book called 3 Mile an Hour God. And his whole kind of
Oh,
premise is that the average walking speed is 3 miles an hour, and Jesus walked everywhere, and that means that love has a speed. And his whole kind of
oh,
premise is,
love has a speed.
isn't that great? And
That
his
is
whole kind of
beyond
thesis,
great.
and these are my words, this is my summary, but his kind of thesis is it possible that many of us are missing out on the activity of God simply because we're moving too fast? Like, we of course we're going to miss the wonder of these beauty in common spaces because I'm traveling at 70 miles an hour all the time. Did you know that over half of the miracles of Jesus were interruptions? He was going somewhere else. He had a plan for the day and he was interruptible. I would say that's a spiritual discipline that I've tried to adopt. Like,
Love
what does
that.
it mean to be interruptible?
Be interruptible.
That's hard, especially if you're a type A, either like a busy bee or a high achieving. Like, the interruptible feels.
Probably even more important for those of
I
us
think
that,
so.
yeah, we
Absolutely.
need to, interruptible needs to be a priority. Yeah.
But it can feel really counterintuitive
Yeah.
if we're dead set on my plan, my agenda, my schedule for the day. And, so those kinds of things have been things that I've asked people to hold me accountable to. Like, allow
Mm.
me, call me out if you find that I'm not ever interruptible or am
Yeah.
always on my phone or always responding within the first 30 seconds of something happening. I've invited people into that, and that's been really helpful.
Love it. Well, I could chat with you for hours, honestly.
Same,
Yeah.
same.
Thank you. It was
Oh,
so much fun. I love to close with a tiny trust that seems so ordinary. And
mm-mm.
you've already given several wonderful examples, but something that's so ordinary that really you made that tiny trust, and you may continue to do it on a daily basis, that you feel like really impacts your day to day or impacted the course of your life, that you
Hmm,
feel would be helpful. Um,
man, this won't be for everybody, but I write every single day. And
I
and
love it. Yeah.
and honestly, sometimes, and it stemmed from a really funny challenge. This was back when blogs were a really big thing. A buddy of mine.
I didn't know blogs weren't a big thing anymore, but go
Oh,
ahead. Yeah.
maybe they still are. I have no idea. That's
Oh,
very possible.
I'm so old. No, I don't know what the current thing is. So yeah.
But I credit this friend for a lot of my love for writing because he challenged me to. He called it a blog a day challenge. So for 30 days, he and I each had to write something every day and publish it before midnight that day. So there's like a public kind of accountability piece to it. And
Wow.
because I'm kind of competitive, I didn't want to. And I'm telling you, there were so many days where I would sit down on my computer at 11 o'clock at night and I'd be like, I have nothing. Nothing happened. Like, I didn't read anything interesting. And I'm like, well, I don't want to lose. So I would just start writing. And I was shocked at like the brief interaction on the train from 12 hours earlier or a phone call that I'd taken from an old friend that I hadn't talked to in a bit, like things that were such small moments throughout the day
Mhm.
because my buddy had challenged me to just write something every day. It like it stirred wonder and awe in a way that I don't.
Really?
Oh my goodness. And so now, we all have like notes apps or whatever on our phone. Like my phone is filled with like little incomplete sentences, little run-on sentences, little word pictures or metaphors that will probably never see the light of day. But like just the rhythm of like I'm just gonna write every day. I'm just gonna make it a discipline. And I wish I could tell you that I do it at the same time every day. I don't. Some of it I think is really helpful. Some of it's pretty dumb. Some of it is pretty silly. It's like it's something my 7-year-old said and I just thought it was funny. But like that discipline of what I'd maybe call like holy noticing, like for whatever
Oh,
reason, for me, writing it down has helped me.
writing it
Like
down.
I just want to be better at kind of holy noticing, and that's helped me a lot.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Holy noticing is for everybody. It
Mm-hmm.
is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But writing it down, that habit forced you into
Totally.
that holy noticing. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, Ian. This was such a joy, and um I'm truly grateful. I know our listeners will be extremely blessed by your words and your experience and your enthusiasm and joy. Thank you.
It's my
Oh,
my my privilege. Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing. I'm cheering you on.
well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope our paths cross again soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye bye. Cheers. Thanks so much for joining us on Even Just a Little.